Welcome to XYPN Radio, where your host Alan Moore brings you into a community of fee-only financial planners who want to profitably and successfully serve Gen X and Gen Y clients. If you're ready to get the knowledge you need from leaders in your field, learn from forward-thinking advisors, and take action on your own goals, XYPN Radio is the show for you. Here's your host.
Hello and welcome to this episode of XYPN Radio. I am your host, Alan Moore, and I'm excited to have XYPN member Wakefield Hare, founder of Greater Than Financial, on the show today. Wakefield started his financial planning career with another firm and was the succession plan for an aging advisor. He bought into partnership in early 2015, but by late 2015, he learned about XYPN and a light bulb went off in his head. He decided to leave to start his own firm, bringing about 60 client relationships with him. 3 years later, he has just over 100 client households and has started to focus more on his niche of serving homeschool families. As a homeschool parent himself, he understands the challenges faced by the typically single income households and all the financial decisions that go into homeschooling your kids. When discussing where things go from here, he admitted that contentment has been the enemy of pursuing opportunity, which is a quote I absolutely loved. And we had a great discussion about what happens when you realize you have enough money, enough time with family. What drives you in your entrepreneurial journey when you feel like you have enough? It was a really interesting discussion that I think you'll appreciate. XY Planning Network's annual benchmarking study is out. Are you curious about the average number of clients XYPN members get in their first year, or how successful niches really are? To answer these burning questions and more, we've again enlisted a professional research firm to complete our annual benchmarking survey. Get your copy hot off the press and discover vital statistics such as the median advisor revenue by years in practice and sources of firm growth from referrals to blogging, social media, and more. Head over to xyplanningnetwork.com/study to purchase your copy. You can find any of the additional resources that we mentioned during the episode at xyplanningnetwork.com/176. Also, be sure to go to xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP to join our private group just for XYPN Radio listeners. It's the community of advisors we've all been looking for that's there to provide support when we need it the most. Best of all, it's free. I encourage you to check it out. Again, that's xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP. Without further ado, here's my interview with Wakefield. Hey, Wakefield, welcome to the show, man. Thanks so much for being on.
Yeah, I am excited to do this, Alan. Thank you.
So give us a little bit of background or sort of an overview of your firm. Where are you located? How many clients do you have? Do you have a niche? And then we'll dig into the details.
Okay, so I am located in Savannah, Missouri, which is a town of 5,000. We're just about an hour north of Kansas City, so right in the heart of the continental United States. And not to get too deep too early, but I just worked out of my home here in Savannah for a long time. I do have an office space now. We have a unique situation in which we own one of the old buildings on those old city squares. So my wife and I live in the loft apartment with our kids upstairs, and then my office is a storefront window downstairs, which is really cool. So we've enjoyed that, and it's unique, and it's worked out well for us. I don't see a lot of clients in here. Occasionally I still try to keep as efficient with things as possible when it comes to client interaction. And so sometimes they come in here, sometimes I go to them, sometimes we're talking over phone or virtually. But the business is about 3 years old now, coming up on it. Joined XY late 2015 and then got launched the beginning of 2016. My career was almost a decade old at that point, and welcome to talk more about that history. But the journey of starting my own business was and just really, when I first heard your name was crazy timing. You were coming to speak to an FPA group in Kansas City, and that just set off a whole series of events that I really cannot believe that I am sitting where I am today with the kind of, this is so crazy that I really think it's divine. So I'm very thankful.
Well, I want to dig into that. How many clients do you have currently?
So I have just over 100 families I serve. I call about half of those pretty passive clients, in that I serve them, but it's on a very much as needed basis as opposed to routine work and putting a little bit more proactive nature to my role in those relationships. So I tell people really I'm serving 50 families in a financial planning relationship that is really robust.
So basically 50 ongoing planning relationships and probably 50 as needed relationships.
Mm-hmm, you got it.
Okay. And then do you have a target market or sort of a, similarity between your clients?
Yeah. So I still have plenty of my clients that I've built out over my career since 2008 that are outside of my, what I would say is my ideal client now. And questioned like, okay, do I keep those folks on board? But the reality is I still love to serve them. And so as I ask different, advisors or coaches to say, what should I do with this group that steals a good chunk of my revenue, but they're not ideal clients. Like they're not the ones I just get so pumped up to talk to and see and just walk away thinking that was more fun for me than it was for them. So those clients are still around, but my ideal and target market is this group that are 50 and younger who still have children and decisions and financial decisions, particularly related to their children. And that's not just education. There's so many financial decisions that go along with our kids all through the stages.
Yeah.
So a lot of one income families. So there ends up being a lot when you have a stay-at-home parent to talk through and what that looks like and not just financial, but also emotional and psychologically in nature of what that means for a family. So I have a lot of those families that I really love working with. A lot of my families that I love serving the best are homeschool families. So my wife and I chose to start down the path of homeschooling our kids. We have 3, 8, 7, and 3. And so in that, I was like, wow, there's a lot of these families who share a lot in common with us, and they share a lot of the same value systems that drive them to make that kind of decisions with their families. So in that respect, why not reach out to those types of families with my business? And it's still a kind of a beta phase niche, I would call it, where
Sure.
I've done some specific things and I have families that, man, they fit that criteria and they have been as good as I thought it would be to serve them. However, it's like I still have some significant opportunity to pursue down that road, but it's been really good so far.
Yeah, listeners may or may not be aware that I was actually homeschooled pretty much my entire life. I started, my parents pulled me out of school in 2nd grade, and then I homeschooled all the way through 12th. So, and in a way, yeah, I guess
you're still learning at home, right?
That's it. I'm still a homeschool kid at heart. Yeah, and it is a huge community that is very insulated in a way, and sometimes that's good. Sometimes there's pros and cons to that, and depending on how far you go. But I think it would be very difficult to tap into that niche unless you were in that niche. That's one of those, like, they need to see you as their own before you're really going to make it in. But a huge opportunity, because there are a ton of homeschool families out there. You just don't see them because they sort of run in a different circle than folks with kids that are in school. They just sort of live in different areas, if you will.
Yeah, exactly. And they're busy families. Their lives are full. It's not easy to pull something off like that when you're trying to add something that most people say, oh yeah, this can be provided while we go do our jobs. When you're trying to mix all that together, these people, they desire to learn what's best for their lives. And so they're usually always busy trying to either learn new things or already doing productive things. So you have to find ways to tap into it. I think by showing up consistently, and that's what I'm attempting to do.
I guess just to derail for a second, talk to me about the decision that for you and your wife to homeschool. What drove that? Because as a business owner, we think of, okay, well, I need to focus fully on my business. So sort of get the kids out of the way so I can, we love our kids, but we need to be able to focus on the business, right? So homeschooling is a huge commitment as parents in terms of time and energy and focus and all of that. So talk to me about that decision and why y'all ended up going this direction.
Right. And I think you asked the question because you're privy, that ultimately my lifestyle, because of this business, definitely influenced the decision to homeschool. In our sense, like I really hated the idea because my wife and I both had great public school experiences, and the public schools in our community are really fantastic. They're great. There's nothing to run away from there. However, when we started looking at things, not from that so much, like there was big picture thinking to it, but you get away from some of those big picture things, like what's a public school like? And we were just saying, okay, it's time to send our daughter to kindergarten. I'd already, had my firm started and was able to work fairly flexibly. It's not easy to do, but I'm the master of the domain here and how I spend my time in Greater Than Financial and my RIA. And then my wife was already a full-time homemaker because we really wanted her to be, especially at home with the kids when they were young, because there's research to say, how important that time is with parents and moms at that young age. And that's not anything against those who can't do it. But when you have an opportunity to pursue it, it's like, we want to try it because that could be really good. And we really want to give these kids the best advantage. So in that, when it came time to enroll in kindergarten, it's like, okay, yeah, sure, let's get them off. But we were looking at my time and Sarah's time and realized, hey, we really get to control our schedule and it's extremely flexible. And if we take advantage of that flexibility to continue to pursue life and to its fullest extent, we may be able to do some really cool things as a family that others just could never dream of doing. And so that was really at the heart of our decision to homeschool, is to say, why not try to live like nobody else, to steal a Dave Ramsey quote. And so far, it's really played out pretty well. We are also involved with Young Life in our community. So we do have some ties to the public school schedule. But at any time, if we see an opportunity to pursue something as a family, whether that's travel, certain educational experiences, certain things with family, just what comes up in life with family, somebody gets sick, somebody dies, all these things that can happen, and saying we are ready to respond immediately to the things we feel are most important in life. And tying that back to my business, I'm just extremely thankful that I have this opportunity where I don't have to feel bad that even if I worked for a great employer and they said, you have all the flexibility in the world, you still feel that kind of gut-wrenching feeling of like, hey, but they have to cover for me, or they ultimately are paying for this. And where I know like, hey, Sarah and I are the ones that have to absorb some of these decisions. It makes it so liberating to pursue life how we think it should be lived.
Yeah, I mean, I remember, I guess I was in middle school and we spent 6 weeks, started in Georgia and drove in let's say we did 2 trips. One was, I'm trying to remember which one was which. So I think the 6-week trip we had a 15-passenger van that we rented. We went with one other family and we just drove up and down the East Coast. We went to every Civil War and Revolutionary War site that we could find. And it was so cool because, we went in September. So like all the other kids are in school. There's no one at any of the public parks or any of the museums or anything that we're at. We camped in KOA campgrounds the whole time. And I remember that, at the time, I'm not sure that you fully appreciate it, but, looking back now, that was such an awesome experience. I remember we got to stand at the top of the Gettysburg Hill where the Battle of Gettysburg happened. And I will tell you, it is a lot more real when you stand on that little bitty hill, because that is a very small hill. That is not a mountain as you envision it, from the history books. And just being able to sort of see like, oh my gosh, no wonder everyone died on this hill. And it was just, and so those were the type of opportunities that I appreciated. Again, there's pros and cons and right. It's judgment against families that make other decisions. I am not currently planning on homeschooling my kids, so I'm not judgmental against people that don't homeschool. But I will say that I truly never learned how to, I don't know. I clearly have a problem with authority. And so that may have come from, I was never broken. My parents sort of allowed that through homeschooling. But
Mary's working on that, I'm sure.
She is. It is a long road. Or my kids are probably more so the ones that are working on it.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
So take me back and just talk about real quick about just sort of career path. You said you were 10 years into the career. So what career did you think you were going to be when you grew up, when you first started as an adult?
Well, that's like you said, authority. I'm not sure I've started completely as an adult yet, but I'm still working on it too. When I went to school at Northwest Missouri State University in Northwest Missouri, it was really just like whatever. I majored as an agriculture major, not because I really did not like agriculture pursuits, but there was a lot of ag scholarships out there. So it's like this got me in a really good financial place going into my college education. And then as I kind of settled down into school and thought, man, what do I want to do? I thought, hey, maybe meteorology, that sounds fun, but then realized, you got to move to some market in Nevada or I won't say Montana, but like to start out like, I'm not sure I'm cut out for that. So my dad, before he passed away, I was a freshman in high school. He did 2 years with New York Life. And he was just a career hopper. He was really just trying to find himself. He didn't like authority, so he wanted to start his own business, which was so strange because I was like, I do not want to own my own business. I have no desire. I will be a good employee and I will do my job and go back home. But anyway, he got started with New York Life and he was doing fantastic with the brutalness of the cold calls and the expectations they laid on him. He was really bold. He was good at it. And I remember him telling me, even though I really don't like New York Life and what they represent now and the way they go about their business, not the people. Like I know some great people in there. I was just like, man, there's such a better way to do business. But anyway, what he told me, he's like, man, I feel like I'm really making a difference with families when I do this work. And that stuck with me, even though I knew so little about financial markets at that time. And what's more is that 2 years later, when he ended up dying in a plane crash, he did take care of his family. Like he took really good care of us, where our financial concerns were non-existent after his passing because he planned for us. And that was like really meaningful. And I think set me on a course in life that I just don't know where else it could have gone. So that led me to pursue financial services in college. And then I got my first job even before I graduated in St. Joe, Missouri, which is a little bigger, kind of a suburb of Kansas City, and was able to have a mentor there, a guy that I ended up becoming a partner with for a broker dealer. It was like a broker dealer hybrid. We still operated some under their RIA that the broker dealer had. But, when you're operating under a broker dealer's RIA, it's not a pure,
limiting.
It's not a pure experience. And I always remember thinking as I was learning things, because that was my only experience to that point for the first 9 years of my career. I was like, oh, this would be so cool if things could be this way. But no, it's just the way things are that they're this way. It's too bad. And then when I saw that you were coming to KC, it's like, oh, this XYPN network sounds interesting. I had to miss your talk because I was on my way to New York, and I went to this like financial innovation conference in New York City, and just by myself. And I think just a mixture of things that were going on at that time, my eyes, all of a sudden, I just had scales fall off of them. And once I came back home and started looking more into XY and what you had started, I guess about a year old at that point, I was just like, oh my goodness, this is so crazy. I remember talking to my wife saying, I already had some great offers to leave my firm to go work for other people before, but I was like, you don't understand the loyalty I have with my partner. Like it's almost like a father or grandfather son type relationship. XYPN network was the only thing I could ever imagine coming across that managed to say, no, this really does need to be different. And I wrote a letter to my partner, even though I just bought into partnership earlier that January. This is January 2015. Wow. Yeah.
So less than a year.
We refinanced our house and gave him money. And this is only 5 to 6 months later. And it was so clear, though, that this was such a beautiful opportunity that it made perfect sense. And we're like, we are willing to let that investment just go, be kind of as a peace offering to my partner of saying, hey, this wasn't the plan. I was a succession plan. He was in retirement age almost already. So it wasn't easy. But I also knew there was a lot of things that it's not a matter of let's work this out. Like it really needed to be a parting and a starting new and fresh. So once I delivered that to him, it was tough. It was really hard, but I have zero regrets because it's just been everything I expected and more since then to start the business and pursue it here on my own in Savannah.
So were you able to take any clients with you, or did you really broke away and started clean?
Mm-hmm. I owned all my client relationships. So in that case, they almost all came with me. There was a couple of mine that chose to stay, and then a couple of his that chose to come with me.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, that was interesting. And then even the couple that chose to stay, it was interesting because since then, that's been almost 3 years ago. He got to sell his business a year later, which I was so thankful for, to a firm that was probably a better fit than I'd ever been for him because my thinking had changed about financial services investments. So anyway, he sold that. That was great. A good ending to his story. And it made me feel a little less guilty because it was a tough situation, but like I said, I don't have any regrets. But those clients that ended up staying later after they went to this new firm, I got a call about 18 months later, like, hey, we really want to come over now. And it's like, I would love to work with you. And I talked to him about that. And I'm like, okay, yeah, that's just fine. So anyway, it's to have my own clients come over with me. It makes me feel like a fake XY member sometime, only because I know what some of these members are struggling through to start their business and just get clients from scratch. I'm just like, I never had to live through that, except just early in my career as I built my business, but I never had to do it. I was getting a salary as I built my business, a small, very, very small. I can't believe how small it was, but at least I didn't have to worry about where a paycheck was going to come from and feed my family.
Sure. So how many clients did you bring over with you? So you have 100 now, and you said those are split between ongoing and sort of one or as needed. So how many of those came over with you?
Yeah, there was about 65 relationships that came with me.
Okay. And was it's still sort of a 50-50 split?
It was still about a 50-50 split in the sense of what I described earlier.
Yeah. I mean, I will say, we deal with a lot of brand misconceptions. And one of them is that everyone starts from scratch. I would say probably of the people who join XY, about 60% are starting a firm, 40% have a firm. So that's one of the big things is people are like, oh, I already have a business. I can't join. And it's like, no. Lots of people do. But of the 60%, I'm betting half have clients, half don't. I'm not sure I have good stats on that. But it's a fair point that it is a tougher road when you've got to start from scratch, zero revenue, zero client relationships, and just go out and hustle versus, not that you don't have to hustle, but already having some relationships in place is a really nice bonus. There's no doubt. How did that conversation go with the clients to say, hey, I'm going to be starting my own firm? Like, how do you have that conversation? And, you don't want to throw your old boss under the bus, but you also want them to come with you and you want to be honest. So I guess, how did you handle that conversation?
Yeah, it was really easy, to be honest, on my part. And that is just because of the type of relationships I was able to build, early in my career with my clients. And, some of the same reasons people get worried about building those types of relationships is because it may be really hard for me to sell my business someday because my relationships are very, very much like family with my clients. And that's only so scalable, obviously. But that's also the thing that made it so easy that when I, sent out the information to clients, say, here's the situation, I will be talking to you soon. And then I'd make the call to each one and it would be almost like a 5-minute conversation. Like, oh yeah, great. And I actually, in that strategically, I was like, okay, I'm coming off to something new. I'm going to be getting rid of office space at first because of this. And because of the much lower overhead overall as a business that XY was able to really show me and the tech tools that were there, I said, I'm going to lower everybody's fees. So we were on a scale of like, at the lowest was 90 basis points and then all the way up to like 175 basis points. And I just brought a lot of those AUM fees down to 75 basis points. And was like, hey, that's really because I'm saving a lot of money by making this move in expenses. I want to pass some of that on to you. But that wasn't even a reason for any client. I can't think of one who were like, oh, because of that fee drop. Great.
Yeah, you made it cheap, so I guess I'll come with you.
Exactly. That just wasn't it. I think they appreciated that because they understand the nature of what I was trying to do there. But it was almost just like, yeah, Wakefield, we'll go where you tell us to go. And that was really refreshing. And, you hear plenty of advisors just say and coaches, to have trust and build trust is so essential. And it's a big part of this whole industry. And so to do everything you can to build and maintain that trust, make some of these, we dig in like on these podcasts and coaching and forums, we dig into this minutia and it's all valid. But at the end of the day, we think, man, our clients really don't care about so much of that. They really want trust.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's like they need it for the relationship to work because they need all the minutia in order to see value in financial planning. Right. But if you ask them, what do you value? They don't say that, you save them X number of dollars on their taxes. It is the relationship that they really value, but the relationship is based on, so much of that. So it is a very complex relationship that we have with our clients.
Right. And then the seeking to simplify it for them in a way like, hey, they're busy. They just want to digest. And just that's why trust becomes so important because they're like, if I can trust you, I can believe that you're taking all of that complex and making it digestible for me in a format that I can, easily take on.
So you said you dropped fees pretty significantly. I mean, so your thinking there was you can run your business more efficiently, you can make it cheaper. Have your fees come up since then, or do you still maintain sort of that lower fee schedule?
So in the sake of simplicity, I went at that time to 75 basis points AUM across the board. And that also was in tandem with the fact that I, through learning about XY and what you and Michael were talking about, it's like, hey, I really want to focus on the retainer and monthly retainer relationships and some ongoing project planning relationships. And so I was really not seeking to lower asset management fees for the sake of, being some type of martyr, like, oh yeah, cutting fees, lowering fees across the board, even though I think that's absolutely true. Technology has made so many of these things easier than ever. And there is some of that downward pressure just because of those things. However, is also a change of mentality starting the business too, where I came from a place where you're getting, there's commission sales there and all the relationships are asset based. And what I was really desiring to do to say, hey, let's take the emphasis off of investments. The investments and assets are absolutely a part of a financial plan and they're going to play a key role always. But there's so much more to it for these clients. And so let's make sure that we're not just coming at it and saying, oh yeah, all of the nuances of how I served you are going to be related to your assets. Like, no, let's simplify that. And if the asset fee ends up covering the planning, great. Then we can simplify it and just deduct fees from your accounts and take care of that. But if that's not a good alignment, which working with clients who are 50 and younger, we find, like you well know, that's not always a great alignment. So how do we set that up to make sure we're emphasizing what's most important with clients? And for me, that is, let's plan for the sake of contentment, which, a lot of times equals more resources or more flexibility with resources. But let's get to the heart of these issues and why I love this job too.
So what is your current fee schedule? So you're at the 75 basis points on AUM. What about the other fees?
Yeah. So I've tried to get as many clients into monthly retainer relationships as possible. And at that point, I do not bring in extra on AUM. So if they are going to be in a monthly retainer, I don't do AUM. And I know that differs from plenty in the industry. But what I found is that with TD Ameritrade and the tools they've made available, that does not become a very, there's very little overhead to that part of my work. So I can easily just integrate that into the monthly retainer fee and be very satisfied. On the lowest monthly retainer fee, when I first started, it was like, oh, let's do $100 a month. And, I saw what some of the other XY members were charging, like, whoa, I'd be thrilled to get $100 a month. But now it's easy to say like, hey, my minimum on the monthly retainer is 165 and I'll push that up to 250. I don't have anybody above 250 right now, but that's just going to very much depend on their situation. And I still don't have it very strategic in how I break that down per client, but I have been doing it long enough to know that I know pretty quickly like what a client will take and what their fee level should be. I also have really enjoyed doing upfront planning, just not like a full plan at the beginning of a relationship, but I started doing just a consultation fee. At first I was doing it for like $300-$400, but that quickly changed. It was like, hey, I need to do this for $750, where I'd basically just say to a client, I'm going to give you 90 minutes. You'll give me data. I'll have a few questions after the data just to make sure I'm clear on everything. We'll both come prepared. We'll have 90-minute consultation, and then I'll give you some follow-up. At first I was written follow-up, just a couple pages to a few pages. I've started doing video follow-up because I found not only is it easier for me to produce, I can screen share and produce this video and show clients things, but also clients are much more likely to engage with a video follow-up than a written follow-up, the type of clients I'm working with.
So this is not a live video. This is a pre-recorded video.
No, it's pre-recorded. I pull up this free software, open broadcast software, OBS, really great, records my screen, has a little video of me on the bottom. So it's not just, totally robotic. And it's been great. My clients have really enjoyed that.
That's really interesting. I don't think I've ever heard of that before. So no,
either really good or really bad.
No, I mean, video is tough because video, from a marketing perspective, video is great for like SEO and driving traffic, but getting engagement with videos is really hard because that's why we do a podcast instead of a vlog, I guess, instead of a video blog, is because podcasts you can do sort of time within time. Videos are tough because you have to just like sit there and watch and
right.
Just like getting a client. The thought of like asking a client to sit there and just watch a video, I can't imagine they would do it, but they are doing it, which is awesome. But, I've sent many emails that they've ignored and never actually implemented any of the recommendations. So you can only go up from there.
Right.
So that's really cool.
And it is a part of my own experience too that informs me. It's like I still have a hard time when there's any video that's above 5 minutes and, research plays this out. You're still going to have a hard time getting someone engaged in any content that is that long, especially video, when you have to sit and be a captive audience. However, when you have text of multiple pages, that's even harder. And when we get some of these reports that they have multiple page text, that becomes really difficult too. So it's almost like I still tell people, like, please tell me what you're most likely to engage in. And I'll meet you on those terms because I can do both, but I ultimately want you to engage.
Really interesting. So that is your deliverable from the 90-minute financial plan, that meeting?
Yeah, exactly. That's the deliverable. And that really informs both myself and the client at this point, what that relationship should or should not look like moving forward. And so there's been plenty of times where I've had a client and I've gotten a few clients because they're like, I'm really scared of just an ongoing fee relationship. And I'm like, I'm happy to serve those clients mostly because I'd feel the same way. Like I know there's plenty of people who's like, I know quite a bit and I think I have a feel for this, but I just want professional to tell me that I'm on the right track. And I like to serve those people because I identify with them. So there's been plenty of those times. And I have a few clients in New York City they've gone viral just there on those types of relationships because one lady did it and she loved it and she's told friends. And so I've had a lot of good success with those types of relationships, but those aren't the most common. The most common are like, hey, we've gone through this. We can see clearly now the need for ongoing planning or a need at least to really engage for the next year. And so then we'll set that up as either an asset relationship, a UM relationship, or a retained relationship.
Okay. So just so I'm clear, so you have the one-time sort of financial plan, which is either, truly a one-time thing, or it's just the upfront plan. So that's $750. It's right. 90 minutes video deliverable. Mm-hmm. And just to clarify, how long does that video end up being? You said, 5 minutes is the goal, but like how long do those typical videos end up being?
So usually they're 10 to 15 minute and follow.
Okay.
Up. Mm-hmm.
Gosh, man, I think I would talk for 2 hours. That's awesome that you can squeeze what you need to.
I've had to be really conscious about, all right, I need to be so efficient when I'm making these because that gets difficult for me too. But the other thing I tell them all, which I do all the time and do to your podcast, like it's always sped up because our brains work so much faster. And I say, it's not that I'm smarter that I can listen up to sped up content. So I tell clients like, hey, you can take these videos and you can watch them at 1.5 to 2 times speed. And you can not miss a thing. So I always include a link to like a video extension that will speed up video to it as well.
Oh, funny. Okay. So you can actually watch 15 minutes. I've never watched a video, I guess, on sped up where you could hear it. Usually it's like fast forwarding. Think of the old one right. with a VCR. Yeah.
And so I highly recommend for anyone who's not using video speed, it's allowed me to take in so much more video content because I'm often getting those videos, especially if it's something that it's just mostly audio that the video is not doing much. Like you can get that up to 2 to 2.5 times and get what you need out of it much more efficiently.
Someone please tell Michael I just said VCR. He makes fun of me for being young, but I did have one. So we'll leave it at that. Okay. So that's the upfront plan. And then ongoing is somewhere between $50 a month and $250 a month.
Not 50. I don't do any. 50.
Oh, no, none at 50. Okay. No. So what's your low end then on the fee?
The low end is 100. And that's just a few of the clients when I first switched.
Okay. So 100 to 250. So I'm a new client coming in. How do you make that decision? Because, and I will preface this by saying we understand some regulators don't allow this. Okay. It depends on your state regulator on if they'll allow, complexity based or time based or income based. There's a lot of things there, but how do you, how are you making this decision around, how much a client should be paying you? Is it net worth based? Is it time based? Is it complexity? And if so, like what are the inputs?
So I've tried to emphasize my time, knowing the value of my time in putting that onto a client situation to say, how much time will I need to serve them? And a lot of people have, said, well, yeah, but then your hours are limited if you only say, oh, I'm worth, $200 an hour or $300 an hour. But I disagree. I think instead, so as my business gets more efficient, let's say I manage to serve the same type of client and you're like, well, at the beginning, it took you 4 hours to serve this client, but now it only takes you like a half the time to serve the same type of client because you've gotten better. It's like, okay, so now it's not that my time's worth, $200 an hour. Now my time is actually $300 an hour. My time goes up per hour if I get more efficient and not just, the other way around. So there's a little complexity there, but that's really where I always drive it back to, like, what's the value of my time? And then how much will I have to dedicate to serving these clients, and then always being aware of the end results. What is a client after? And coming back to that. So to answer your question, Alan, honestly, it's not nearly as defined process as either it should be or I want it to be, but that's what's driving those decisions. When I say, I kind of have a clock of financial planning in my head where it's like, okay, depending on where a client starts, we need to go here next. And a lot of time, we just need to nail down on income even. And let's talk about their career, which I think is something that gets lost so often. We are some of the best people positioned to help people in their careers reflect. And yet we're not talking about those things because of these are asset relationships, right? So I've loved that part of my job since I've started my own RIA. But anyway, so that might be where we start. And then I know, okay, after we really get things done there, we're going to move over to looking at the assets and making sure those are efficient, and then into insurance, the taxes, et cetera, on and on through the whole planning relationship. And what I see there is I can pretty much know from that early on data, how long is it going to take us to get around that wheel? And then how responsive will a client be as well, to justify me even trying to follow up with them when you have a client that's not responding the way you want them to. So experience has informed me a lot that has allowed me to get away with not having a process that's completely formalized. Like I make some assumptions in my head in there.
Sure.
But it has worked so far.
Okay. Yeah. I read the book Principles, Ray Dalio, is that his name? Which is really interesting. I totally do not agree with his investment philosophy because he's an active management hedge fund guy. But one of the things, really the book is all about how he documented decision-making processes, because we all have it. It's just in our head, which is really interesting because I hear people say, and we all say it, which is like, well, I don't know, I just go with my gut. But like your gut has a process. You just haven't said what it is. And he argues, figure out what that process is that you're going through, because you're thinking like there's like 10 things or 8 things in terms of complexity that you're really paying attention to because they own a business, owning a business, having a partner, having kids, like those are obvious ones. There may be some smaller ones that drive complexity. Like you're making this decision somehow and document it, because one day you're going to screw up. Like one day you're going to say $100 and it should have been about 1,000. And then you can go back and fix it and go, okay, well, I missed, the fact that, I don't know, their business was in real estate or something. Like they're a real estate developer. Holy heck, way more complexity than if it was just a solo small business. So anyway, it is an argument there but because everyone has a process, we just don't really know. I think Ray has literally documented every single process he's ever gone through, which is obnoxious, but you don't have to do that, but just the ones that really matter.
Yeah. That was one of my biggest takeaways from the latest XY conference too, is just, hey, I'm really playing a fool so much when I don't get these things documented. And that's very high on my priority list. And if I could tell any of the young advisors starting out, hey, if you can get on that as soon as possible and be really great at processes, I think it's going to save you so much. Maybe lost income in this case, it'd save you time in other cases. So I'd encourage them to get after that.
And just final clarification. So in addition to the planning fee, are you also charging the AUM or does the planning fee cut off at a certain level of AUM? Like how do those two integrate for you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what I have found is that I do not need to charge AUM when I have a monthly retainer client, unless they specifically want to pay, maybe say, oh, if I could get lower planning fee because we're also doing AUM, and because, it makes sense to take a fee from a traditional IRA if that's part of the, the whole plan. So that I'm flexible with right now, but that rarely happens. In fact, I don't know of a single situation where I'm basically saying, hey, let's get it as simple as possible for you. That way you can understand what you're paying. I think it's really a travesty that so many people don't know what they're paying. And that hurts, because I think that would cause the industry to move forward so much faster if people just understood what they're paying. So I try to make it a priority. Say, let's find something you can understand on how you're compensating me. That's going to just be transparent. It's going to save us heartbreak. But like Michael says, in that fee saliency, that may not be always the best case for clients too. So I battle with that, but I still think as a principle, I really like to stick, as a consumer, I love to know what I'm paying. That way I can make a value decision. And I think if people understood that would be in the best interest of the whole industry, and especially in the vein of the industry that XY finds itself in.
Yeah, I mean, it's also tough because you're competing sometimes against people that say their services are free, right? So you're like, oh, I do charge a fee. And other people are like, well, yeah, but I'm free. So, come on over here. The big company pays me. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, right.
Like, yeah.
I love getting those situations and then pointing out exactly to people like, oh yeah, they say that, but here's why it's not true. Exactly.
Yeah. I made the mistake one time. I had a doctor client that had purchased from a rising premium disability insurance policy, and it had a 3-year breakpoint that after 3 years, the flat or the level fee would have been cheaper within 3 years. I mean, if it was like 15 years, I get it, but it was so early, and watching premiums go up. And so, and they were just mad. They were like, what? Why? Why did they sell us this policy? And I made the mistake of telling them how much the commission was, because I had asked, I was using LLIS to do a review of it. And they had told me, what the commission rates were on these things. And I made the mistake of telling them, and they were hot. Oh man, they were pissed because they didn't know that. I mean, they should have known, but they didn't know how the insurance agent was getting paid. And when you realize, I think that one was like a $30,000 or $40,000. I mean, it was a huge policy.
Yeah. So why do you call that a mistake? To tell him that?
Oh, well, just because I probably made him more mad than necessary at the situation. So maybe not a mistake, but he was ticked. We didn't get much done in the rest of that meeting. But So switching gears a little bit, you are in a very small town, and which is, typically you think of financial planning firms, they're centralized in your big cities. I mean, even like we barely have any firms here in Bozeman, and we've got, 50 to 100,000, depending if you're looking in city limits or the valley. And so like you're in a town of 5,000. How do you start a firm and really go get clients in that small of a community, or are most of your clients not in your community and you're finding them outside?
Right. So there's two answers to that. To the one, the situation where I'm at is that I'm a town of 5,000. Within 15 minutes, there's a town of 70,000. And then within an hour is Kansas City. So, a metropolitan area. Lots of clients in Kansas City, many in St. Joseph, the city bigger than mine. But there are still plenty of clients out here. We live in it's not a wealthy corridor, but it's along the I-29, from Kansas City to Omaha. So there's plenty of action here and plenty of economic activity. So there are clients, even where it doesn't seem, like every situation where there's like, hey, people in need. And a lot of those aren't fits. That's the worst part. Is like you start to say, well, when the big pool is small, I may end up accepting somebody who's not a great fit. And that is a real risk. But I was able to build a business on that, and now able to expand definitely beyond geographic bounds to attract clients. I really, as the niche grows, and seeking homeschoolers, what we find is that most homeschool families live in two states, and that's California or Texas. And then the numbers of homeschoolers there are really, they're obscene. It's crazy. And so I know that if I really get after it, what I need to do is build hubs I'd probably go to Texas first because that's closest. So I see opportunity there. Right now I have a lot of contentment. So contentment has been the greatest enemy of pursuing opportunity for me. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It just means like, hey, things are so good that I don't have to go out and keep hunting like a hungry, wolf. So the other part of that question too, though, Alan, is to say, if I had nothing near my town of 5,000, I would not be afraid to start my business here, because of exactly what you had purported and you and Michael had set up early on. It's like, hey, being able to work virtually, being able to create a niche and your storefront being your website and these things, and you can just develop and you could pound away at it. Maybe you have to go visit places, certain places a few times a year for travel, but most of the time, folks in our generations aren't going to require that. So it would absolutely be possible. I see the opportunity would be absolutely there if I didn't have the benefit of saying I have big communities with lots of people around me.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because, XY, I mean, we were completely virtual. Now we have headquarters, and we're in Montana, where like, I think we have 2 or 3 members in Montana now. One just moved here from Atlanta because he just wanted to, and he doesn't have any clients here. So like, I know we don't have the exact same business model, but I am confident that, if we can build a business in a town that's small, anyone can. The difference being the marketing strategy is different if you are in a small town versus a big city and all of that. It's more of just like, I'd be interested to, I guess we don't have good stats on this either, but I think I see a lot of, folks joining XY and starting businesses in very rural areas, just because they can. And, you need 50 to 100 clients, and there's 50 to 100 clients within a few hour drive, even if you want to build something local. Right,
exactly. And that's the thing with the niche mindset that I said, man, I'm not pursuing it because I already have a niche. I already have, a solid client base. But if I was starting from scratch in Savannah, Missouri, there's a couple big corporations in St. Joseph that I think a part of my niche would I just be so dedicated to serving those employees of those corporations. And they're not tens of thousands of employees, but, there's 750 employees at these places where if you got 10, if you caught the attention of just 10% of them and you were able to serve, 1%, like that's a big chunk of business there. And being the one that's like, I know the ins and outs of your benefit plans. I know everything. Like there's opportunity there. And I think you can find that if you're looking in the right way.
Now, I want to go back to the quote, contentment has been the enemy of pursuing opportunity. Mm-hmm. I love that. Tell me more about because, and sometimes this pops up, listeners have heard me say it's really hard to get out of a warm bed. And we see that with folks that are thinking about starting a firm where they're like, I'm making enough money. Like, do I really need to go start a firm? I could, but maybe I'm happy enough. Like, it's a tough decision, but you're in this position as a business owner where you've hit enough.
Right.
I mean, isn't that what contentment is, right? Like you have enough.
Yeah.
And so what drives you, and I've wondered this myself, is like what drives you when you have enough money, time, flexibility? And do you think like now that you're there, are you just going to sort of not pause, but sort of flatline it and just sort of say like, all right, let's or coast, if you will, or I'm going to coast, or are you thinking like, do you need a kick in the pants to really get back on it and start growing the business?
Right. I think it's something that I hope fills conversations in the halls of XY networks and forums and conventions, because I think it's a really big question. I was coaching with Arlene Moss, and she was coaching me. And we talked about this quite a bit, saying, Arlene, I am just so darn happy. Like, I'm so thankful for what I have that it does make it really tough to get after it. And she did a really great job of saying, yes, it's good. Things are awesome. And she's so happy things are awesome for me. But at the same time, what do you really believe in, and kind of examining that. What do you want to accomplish? Like, is this really as good as it gets, Wakefield, or do you believe there's something else out there? And that's the kind of thinking. It's like, you're absolutely right. This world, this universe is far too vast to think like, this is me. I'm just living high and happy on the hog. It's like, that's not fulfillment. Then that's not contentment that'll last, unless I think we're continually pursuing ways. How do we make people's lives more rich around us? And that's really where I think my life becomes the most rich, when I think of ways to make people's lives. Where the challenge has really been is the intersection of like, how much of that is in my business versus how much of that is just going on in the lives around us. And you understand it as a husband and a father. It's like, okay, those are real things. They're not real things that say, let's give 100% of our time to them, but they're real things to consider. How does this play in to ultimately fulfilling my purpose, my God-given purpose, to live a life that's full, but live a life of service and have a maximum impact, like the impact I was created for? So that's not really answering your question, but just saying, I think we have to always be asking those questions of ourselves and others, because they're so big. And it doesn't only have to do with our business. This has to do absolutely with our own fulfillment, not just for one day, 1 year, but for our lifetimes, forever, really. And what's going to make it that we can say life is full forever?
I remember, I think it was Michael, maybe in his first podcast, maybe back in episode 1, I think it was his, because he started out as a life insurance agent. And I believe it was his trainer that said, go buy the biggest house and the most expensive car you can afford, because you need the payment to drive you. And it is this interesting thing that I think hopefully we all as business owners approach a day where we suddenly realize like we've made enough money, like we have enough income or we have enough assets. It's that moment that we hope our clients achieve, right? And most people don't realize when they've hit it, because most of our clients don't know when they've actually hit it. And we have to be the ones to inform them like, hey, you can retire if you wanted. But, what is going to drive you past it? And it's something to think about that, what's going to drive you past, the point of enough? Because when you're a desperate, hungry entrepreneur, like you're out there grinding because you need to eat and you need to feed your family and put a roof over your head and all those things. But once those things are done, sort of what will drive you? There's no right answer. It's different for everyone, but it is something to contemplate. You make Arlene sound like a therapist, which she is. She's a therapist for business owners. She is not licensed, so licensing don't come after me. She is a business coach, but those are great questions to be thinking about.
Absolutely. And you brought up Ray Dalio earlier. I listened to a podcast of his very recently. I think it was on Freakonomics, and how he said something very same. He's like, once I made it, you get to stage of life, that early stage, you're so hungry, that stage where you're kind of like in it. And I've made it. And he's moved on to this stage. And I think his principles book was about that is, like, I get my kicks now from helping others make it, bring them out of stage 1 into stage 2. And I hope there's plenty of advisors who that is what they're getting their kicks. I hope there's plenty of planners and advisors who will make it their mission to continue to change the industry. Like XY, you and Michael have talked about, who like, okay, my business is set, but we still need to move some of these people who are in really bad financial planning, investment management situations. There's just conflicts everywhere. We need to, as an industry, move them out. I think that'll be way more effective than relying on regulation to get that done.
Absolutely. You've mentioned it a little bit, and when I took a look at your website, you were very, you were very public, I guess, with the fact that you do a lot of integration of your faith into the financial planning process. Mm-hmm. So, can you talk about how you integrate faith into your planning process? I mean, do you find that most of your clients are of the same faith, and is it influential in your planning process, or is it not so much?
Yeah, so I have it on my website only because I find that if someone met me and started having a conversation with me, they would find it very dishonest if I didn't list like, hey, look, my faith and my Christian faith, my faith in Jesus Christ is a driver, of every day, hopefully every thought, but that is not the case, unfortunately. But what I really have tried to de-emphasize is seeking out serving other people who are Christian. I am happy to serve them. And I had this conversation at the conference with a good friend. And really the idea of saying, look, if the goal is fulfillment, like we don't need to be saying, yeah, this is all about, Christians working with Christians, but ultimately saying, hey, let's start to uncover and examine all areas of your life, that really, and the resources as the hub of that to make sure that you have full life. And what I found is that I've had a lot more success with just diving in with somebody and not getting the background first of like, oh, let's double check that we're Christians first, of really just saying, what do you value? Like, what do you value in life? Is it your children? Is it your work? Is it, a hobby of yours? And starting on that common ground, instead of saying, oh yeah, we both share a common faith, then now we can work together. It's like, let's just start on the common ground of what's the reality of our lives, and then start to work it to say, do I have anything to offer you? Do I think I'm able to help you, and not have to have that as a prerequisite at all? I don't mind it when it is. I think it's great, and it started some great relationship, and it does affect, a worldview and how we handle our resources. But also I found I've had some fantastic relationships of people who say, no, I really struggle with the idea of who God is or what he's created me for, or I don't believe at all. And yet we've found some really fruitful and productive relationships by not saying, well, let's first start to make sure we agree on this. Instead saying, well, let's just start the conversation about the things we can, work on and see where that leads, and not have to preface it all the time.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Like I said, no matter what side of the aisle you're on politically or religiously, or you really, I'll say almost any issue that could get wrapped into those two topics, which is almost anything. It is really hard to put yourself out there and say, I am a Christian, I am Muslim, I am a Democrat, I am a Republican, because you just feel like you're going to alienate, which is interesting because, I would say I guess it's the era of social media, but everything seems to be an alienation now. So when you say I'm a Christian, if you are not a Christian, people are like, oh, there's no way. But that really applies to any belief. And so it does take a lot, I feel like, to put yourself out there. But it sounds like you're still engaging with folks, and folks are still saying like, hey, that's great, Wakefield, that you're a Christian and that, you have a strong belief in Jesus, but I don't. And we're still going to work together, which I would think that would turn those folks away.
Right. And it may have, those may be folks who've never knocked on my door or drop me a line. And that's fine. And I think if they feel that strongly, they'd have a hard time. But at the same time, what you say is true. And I think it's the one thing that's really our world is not good at right now. And I'm not good naturally at it either. But starting to say, what can we say we agree on before we have to bring up what we very much don't agree on?
Right.
And we find like, man, humans just share a lot of these same deep desires. And even some of these people, like you mentioned Muslims and Christianity, you find like, you probably agree on so much. Yes, there's some key tenets in there that you very much disagree. But if you started where we agree, I think then on the key tenets where, we diverge, then we have a lot more empathy and understanding. We're better listeners too.
Yeah, it's a great point that typically, in religion, there's a lot more, and even politics, there's a lot more similarities that we don't focus on. It's always interesting because in the U.S., we feel the political system just feels so adversarial right now, right? Like you're either on the left, you're on the right. But when you compare our political system to sort of world political system and all the different systems that are out there, like we're actually very closely aligned because we all believe in the same core of, democracy and, all of those sorts of things. But anyway, sorry to derail, but it is one of those things.
Can I say one more thing?
Oh, yeah.
I think like overall, if people like in advisors and planners who are listening to this podcast, just relax. I think that would go a long way. Like everybody sits there and like, oh, I need to do this for my business, or I need this type of client, or oh, this type of client's, causing me all this trouble. Like, you just relax. And out of the, you taking a deep breath and having some peace in your own life, I think you're going to find these situations really start to thaw for you as well.
So you would say put yourself out there, but just relax about what that's going to mean for you.
Yeah, exactly. Don't take yourself so seriously. Put yourself out there, and the risk is worth it. There's a great quote, and I think it applies to the network and my business and our lives, is those who say no, not putting themselves out there, those who say no are going to be rewarded by the safety they maintain. And those who say yes are going to be rewarded by the adventures they have. And it's just like my wife and I are much more interested in having adventures than maintaining safety all the time.
I love it. Like I said, it's tough. I remember even when I was starting my firm, putting out there that I was 25, like I was terrified of my age. And, I tried to put on a confident front, like, oh, well, but I'm not old and I'm going to be here your whole, until you retire and blah, blah, blah. But like, I was terrified. And I remember finally just saying like, all right, I'm going to put videos on my website. I'm going to put everything out there of who I am. Even something for as basic as age, because I don't want anyone getting in my office and being surprised that I'm 25. And the same with you. Like, you don't want someone coming in that, like, I don't know, very many people that hate Christians, but if they say like, I hate Christians, and you don't want them to walking into your office being like, oh, whoops. Like, there's no way I'm going to work with this guy. Like, I'd rather, to your point, I'd rather weed that personality type or that belief system out if they're not going to work well with you, because they're going to figure it out.
Exactly.
So, awesome. So, this has been so much fun. As we're sort of coming to a close, you've given a couple of awesome tips. Actually, before I jump into that, I want to ask you one more question. Okay. What are you working on over the next 6 to 12 months or 18 months? Like what, you mentioned you're hitting this level of contentment because income's there. You're sort of where you want things to be. You're homeschooling your kids, like things are rocking, right? What are the big initiatives that you are planning over the next couple of years? Or are you really thinking like, hey, I'm sort of done business initiatives. I've got some other stuff I'm going to be working on.
Yeah, we talked about it earlier. It's just process, documenting, because I am at that stage of, if I don't get that done, then this is as big as it will ever get, as far as business, as far as client relationships, as far as impact. So to really take so seriously getting processes, and in that, like I've always known that processes are good, but having the thought at the forefront of my mind and written in front of me and seeing it daily, that done is better than perfect. I have not done so many processes because I wanted them to be perfect. But done is the key at this point, and they will not be perfect. There's no way they can be. So I need to really make sure that is the case. So that's really on my mind for hopefully make a lot of progress before the end of the year, into the next 6 months. And then once I get that established, I feel like that's when I have a whole new chapter of business opening up to me, because then I think I'm going to realize just the space available. It's like, oh, marketing and video production. Like I really like making short videos, digestible videos for as far as marketing goes, and really focus on that to continue to get after my niche. And just, I would love it if I get on speaking tours at these homeschool conferences and, develop podcasts and things along those lines. That's never going to happen unless I get processes first. So let's not get the cart before the horse. I think that's what I've done the last 2 years with talking about my niche, is like, oh yeah, that horse, get on up there. But like, I don't have a cart.
Yep.
So I need to get those processes in place. So like, hey, let's see how this niche really goes and see if it's as awesome as it could be.
Yeah, you make a great point with the process, because I know some advisors who are sort of known for their processes. And I had a really interesting conversation recently with one that said they were backing off some of their processes because they overdid it. And like things are changing so fast. I mean, even in your, I think about with advice pay, we push code every week into the billing software. So every week something changes, and a button may have been renamed or moved or shifted, or a new feature or whatever. And so when you get down to like click by click processes, the systems just change so fast. I can barely keep up with what's happening, much less as a user of 10 different technologies. So it's like, get to the 80%. Right, 80%, will handle what you need. That last 20% is going to take too much time. It's going to take too much effort. But again, like that whole perfection being the enemy of, what's the word?
Good.
I guess of good. There you go.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so circling back, looking back now, you're 3 years into the business. You've built a successful firm, and really looking, more importantly, have built a successful life and a great life for yourself and for your family. If you could go back and talk to your younger self or to the younger advisors that are listening, that are thinking about starting a firm, what one piece of advice would you go back and give your younger self?
Mm-hmm. So I think the biggest challenge of the last 3 years, and then even extend into my career, is the fact that actually the last 3 years, because I have seen opportunity in ways I just have never seen it before in my lifetime, ever since I've joined the network and started my own RIA. It's just like, because there's a lot of flexibility when you own your own business. There's a lot of flexibility when you're in an RIA and not under a broker-dealer environment. So how do I pursue that opportunity? And that opportunity has really paralyzed me at times, because it's like, oh, this one is so good, but what if something better comes along and I'm already, neck deep into this one? So basically, I wish that I would be more clear about saying, hey, it's not waiting for the next opportunity. You need to seize, kind of carpe diem. You need to seize the day, seize the opportunity. And yes, it goes back to what we just talked about. It may not be the perfect opportunity, but it's really good. And it's better what 99% of people in this world are getting or have an opportunity to pursue. So take that opportunity by the horns and then strategically plan around it. And that's where I've really gone off course, because I thought, maybe another opportunity comes along too. I have never done really well with the strategic planning part and made those opportunities just come to life. So that's what I'd really like to be better at in the next part of my career, as well as telling young people and told plenty of prospective members and new members in the network, like, hey, plant your flag and own it and just go for it as far as strategically planning on how you make that happen, as opposed to wondering like, maybe I do it this way or maybe I don't. It's like, plant your flag, go for it. It may fail, but at least you'll have learned something along the way.
I love it. Well, Wakefield, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show and share your expertise and wisdom, and look forward to seeing how things continue to progress for you over the next coming years. Thanks so much.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Alan. And the last thing I just want to say is thank you and Michael, because this may have happened another way without the XY, but I have a lot to be thankful for, and it's because you two schemed and dreamed this up. So thank you.
Well, thank you for that.
Yep.
XY Planning Network's annual benchmarking study is out. Are you curious about the average number of clients XYPN members get in their first year, or how successful niches really are? To answer these burning questions and more, we've again enlisted a professional research firm to complete our annual benchmarking survey. Get your copy hot off the press and discover vital statistics such as the median advisor revenue by years in practice and sources of firm growth from referrals to blogging, social media, and more. Head over to xyplanningnetwork.com/study to purchase your copy. Be sure to join our VIP community at xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP. Hang out with other XYPN radio listeners, ask questions for future mailbag episodes with myself and Kitsis, and to finally find a community of like-minded financial advisors. Thanks so much for joining me today. We'll see you next time.
You're not alone, and you're not crazy. It's scary starting, building, and growing your own financial planning firm. And that's why we put together a free private community just for you, the Cutting Edge Financial Planner. Go to xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP or text XYPN Radio to 33344 and join a network of thousands ready to change the lives of Gen X and Gen Y clients.